Boeing 999 Kalimera confirms call.
Everything was fine. The weather was clear. The flight was in good condition. The pilots were well experienced, with a total of 16,900 flight hours. So what went wrong? आप जानना चाहते हो? चलिए जानते हैं. On August 14th, 2005, Helios Airlines Flight 522, it's a Boeing 737 31S, was traveling from Cyprus to Prague, Czech Republic, with a stopover at Athens, Greece. The flight was under the control of two pilots, Captain Hans-Jürgen Merten, who had an experience of 16,900 hours of flight. He is a 58 years old English-German contract pilot hired by Helios. And who is the first officer? The first officer was Pampos Charalambous, a 51 years old pilot who had flown extensively on Helios for the past 5 years. And he has an experience of 15,049 hours. Flight 522 took off from Larnaca International Airport at 9:07 a.m. local time, with 115 passengers and 6 crew members on board. Within a short period of time, the flight gained a height of 12,040 feet. Shortly after departure, the crew experienced a pressurizing issue and an alarm started ringing. It's the takeoff configuration alarm. It rings when the flight is grounded, but now the aircraft is already in the air, and when this alarm bell rings, it means the flight is not ready for takeoff. As the aircraft climbed, the pressure inside the cabin gradually decreased. The pilots are confused now, as they don't know what exactly has gone wrong. Soon the pilots radioed the Helios Operations Center and reported the takeoff configuration warning. As they were talking, several warning lights on the overhead panel of the cockpit illuminated, and the master caution alarm started ringing, indicating that multiple systems inside the flight were overheating. Now the situation is becoming tense. Both the pilots have no clue what's happening, and hence they are nervous. The oxygen level started falling, and as a result, they were unable to breathe properly. What happens when the oxygen level is low in the flight? Automatically, the oxygen mask drops. At 34,000 feet, the crew and the passengers began to suffer from hypoxia, a condition caused by insufficient oxygen. Again, the pilot talked to the ground engineer and reportedly stated that the cooling ventilation fan lights were off, but by then they also started suffering from hypoxia. The engineer on the ground asked, "Can you confirm that the pressurization panel is set to auto?" The pilots in the flight, they didn't hear it clearly. Instead, they asked, "Where are my equipment cooling circuit breakers?" This was the last communication with the aircraft. The flight was supposed to reach the Athens airport at around 10:45 a.m. At 9:24 a.m., the flight reached the height of 34,000 feet. At 9:37, the flight crossed the Cyprus Flight Information Region into Athens Flight Information Region without making contact with the Athens ATC. 19 attempts to contact the aircraft between 10:12 to 10:15 were made, with no response from the pilots. Now the ground staff are worried. They have no clue what is happening inside the flight. At that point, the Greek military decided to intervene. They thought there might be some terrorist activities, and hence at 11:05, two F-16 fighter aircraft took off in search of the flight. The fighter jet located the Helios plane and tried to gather information. They wanted to know what is exactly happening inside the aeroplane. When the fighter pilot approached the Helios flight, they observed the co-pilot slumped over in his seat and there is no movement inside the cockpit. In the passenger's cabin, oxygen mask was deployed and passengers appears unresponsive. Now the two fighter jets decided to move little more closer and see what's happening. They moved little closer, but they were unable to see any response from any passengers. The passengers are also not moving. Suddenly, the jet pilot noticed that someone entered the cockpit and trying to fly the plane. Just after some time, the left engine caught fire and within no time, the right engine also flamed out. And now, the aircraft is descending. It's coming down. And just before 12:04, the aircraft crashed into hills near a village called Grammatiko, 40 kilometers away from Athens, and killing all the passengers and crew members. Just imagine how the jet fighter pilots would have felt that time. They felt so helpless. After the crash, the media started covering this news, and all the family members and relatives gathered in the airport. The bodies of 118 passengers has been recovered, which includes 93 adult and 22 children. Autopsies on the crash victims showed that all were alive at the time of impact, but it could not be determined whether they were conscious or not. Now a big question arises. When all the passengers and the pilots were unconscious, who was controlling the flight for so long? For almost 2 hours, who was there inside the flight and controlling it? It was Andres Prodromou. Andres Prodromou, as a flight attendant who entered the cockpit in order to try to save the plane. He was a trained pilot, by the way. However, he was not trained on Boeing 737. He tried contacting the ground staff and shouting out loud 5 times, "Mayday, Mayday, this is Helios Flight 522, Athens." Now, let me tell you how this incident occurred. The previous night, ground engineers had conducted a routine maintenance check and left the pressurization control knob in the manual position, whereas it should be in the auto position when the aeroplane is flying. The auto pressurization button controls the air pressure inside the plane. These crucial details were unnoticed by the flight crew during their pre-flight checks. A big investigation team was there. This investigation team by the Air Accident Investigation and Aviation Safety Board concluded that the crew had failed to notice that the pressurization system was set to manual, which should be in auto when the flight is in the air. The ground engineer had set it to manual to conduct testing and neglected to restore it to automatic afterwards. So what happened? When the flight took off, slowly the air pressure started decreasing and passengers began feeling the effects of lack of oxygen. The pilot failed to realize that the pressurization control was set to manual mode, while oxygen mask automatically dropped for the passengers. But the pilot did not have the same immediate access. Consequently, what happened? The pilots lost consciousness, followed by the passengers, as the mask provides only 12 minutes of oxygen. Now one question may come in your mind. How Andres Prodromou was conscious, whereas everyone else in the flight were unconscious? Let me tell you, he was a scuba diver, and scuba divers can hold their breath for a long time. The bravery of Andres will always be remembered. The Helios Flight Disaster 522 happened only because of one mistake, a slight mistake in one switch. If it would have been in auto, there wouldn't have been any such problem. And hence, such a big disaster happened. So after listening to this, what do you think? Who should be held responsible? If possible, please comment. Thank you so much.